there guys, my name is Tim Perevozchikov and I'm really excited to be doing my second video topic analysis for Champions Briefs for the months of November. So before I actually dive into the analysis, I'll give you guys just a brief overview of what I'm going to be discussing today. We'll be breaking down the November resolution, which is resolved, on balance, the benefits of genetically modified foods outweigh the harms. So unlike my last topic analysis, I'm going to focus a little bit less on specific arguments. For those, you could go see the November Champions Briefs, but rather we're going to be focusing on how to approach this topic and how to sort of break it down and make it manageable because it is quite vast. So that being said, before I actually touch the information on the topic, let's break down some of the major tournaments that are happening in November. The first major one is Mini Apple at Apple Valley, and this is early on in November. Specifically for Mini Apple, as Zach discusses quite prominently in the topic analysis, he had very high-level judging, very technical judging throughout prelims and in out-rounds, but interestingly, unlike other tournaments, the panels got progressively more lay rather than more flow as out-rounds continued. And I think that's an important thing to keep in mind as you're progressing out throughout out-rounds, because that's normally the opposite of what happens. So there are a few things that you should be ready for at Mini Apple. First is being able to answer arguments logically. Since this topic is quite broad and has a lot of different argumentation you can approach, there are going to be arguments that you hear at the first weekend that you don't necessarily have pre-cut blocks for. When hearing these kind of arguments, you have to be able to break down the claim, the warrant, and the impact, delineate assumptions in the argument, and overall be able to respond on a logical level rather than just saying some professor from some university says that your opponents are wrong. And so I think when going throughout Mini Apple, just keep in mind that you have to be able to be making arguments that are accessible to your judges, both in prelims and in out-rounds if you want to be successful. And so the second major tournament is that of Glenbrooks, which is considered to be sort of the national championship of the first semester and has a very competitive, very diverse, and very strong field for public forum historically. Additionally, it is, again, an OCTA's bid to the Tournament of Champions, and you are likely to see a lot of very technical, experienced judges that are familiar with the event. A lot of alumni will make an appearance to come back and judge for their respective schools. And I think that all of this considered, since it is later on in the month, you could start running more nuanced link stories, more arguments that are diverse and haven't necessarily been heard, because towards the end of the month, block files are going to be extensive. So that team that thinks outside the box and is creative is going to be the ones that are successful. We just want to offer you one caveat. No matter who your judge is in the back of the room, whether you consider them to be technical or flow, we believe that the most successful debaters throughout the month of November will be those that use real analysis and explain their arguments from start to finish, rather than just go for sort of a scattershot of blippy argumentation. And on some topics, blippy argumentation works. On this topic, with so many scientific nuances, the team that's really better able to explain their arguments to the judges are going to be the teams that are winning. And we'd like to caveat that saying, like, the best way to win the Glenbrooks tournament is by creating a nuanced link story and narrative rather than a collection of random cards. Walt Whitman's actually won the tournament the past 3 years by running this very nuanced, complex argument on each respective topic that allowed them to sort of excel through the competition. So that's sort of our word on major tournaments. Now let's actually turn to breaking down the resolution. And I think that for the first time, I think in 2 years, since 2 years ago, the public forum community is taking on a scientific topic. And scientific topics can be quite scary. The literature is often dense, filled with jargon, and not really accessible to a reader that's not a major in biology or biochemical engineering. A lot of this literature is going to be using technological references that you simply won't understand, or mathematical models for computing crop yield increases that are very difficult to sort of rationalize and process if you're not an applied math major, for example. So before actually diving into what the topic is, I'd like to offer a little word of advice on how to be reading the scientific literature, especially if you're unfamiliar with this sort of academia style of writing. So a good strategy that we've used in the past, back on our high school debate team at Hawken is to use the X-ray method of reading research. And the way you apply the X-ray reading is sort of how it sounds. You start with the most basic scan of the book. You look at the article that you're reading. You look at the title and try to figure out exactly what you think the paper will say so that you can have a good mindset for approaching it. And after establishing this clear idea, we want you to check the table of contents and the headers to get a clear image of what you're about to read, because nothing is more frustrating than spending 2 hours breaking down a very nuanced article in the Journal of Biological Medicine and then coming away with no understanding and no relevance to the topic, which it's certainly easy to do something like this on this topic. Additionally, when you're in the middle of these long passages, when you're sort of really in the nitty-gritty details of the scientific explanation, we urge you to sort of take a second, stop, go back to the beginning of the section, go back to the chapter title to understand what you're actually reading. And if you're able to get that nitty-gritty detail, if you're able to really understand it, and then think of a way to explain it in an accessible way to a lay judge. Basically, if you were to rewrite the article in your own words so that your family member, your mom, your dad, your brother can understand it, what would be the language that you use? And that's sort of the question that you should be keeping in mind as you go throughout the month, because a lot of your judges aren't going to be daily readers of the Journal of Biological Sciences. It's just a simple matter of fact that you're going to have to be able to explain things much better than academic authors are. And I think that for those of you that are able to break down this sort of heavy, dense research, you have a clear advantage for this month. So now that we've sort of broken down what the major tournaments of the month are and how to approach the topic in terms of reading the literature and doing the research, let's actually get into the topic itself and start breaking down what each side's ground is and where strategies lie for both the pro and the con. So first, the resolution reads, unresolved, on balance, the benefits of genetically modified foods outweighs the harms. And so for the second month in a row, the NSDA has defined very clear boundaries and sides for the debate, right? So the pro is going to be saying genetically modified foods are good. The con is saying genetically modified foods are bad. Pretty simple. And additionally, the use of the phrase on balance is again seeming to default to some sort of cost-benefit analysis. Justin talks about the death of deontology for the public forum community recently with these sort of unbalanced phrasings, but again, you're going to be probably using some sort of standard utilitarian calculus. When it comes to frameworks, however, you can be a little bit more complex. Now, unlike previous months where you would do resolutional analysis in the framework, we believe that this month you're better suited to start developing a narrative in the framework. And what we mean by this is that if you feel comfortable doing so, and I'll discuss this more as we go throughout the topic analysis, but one possible strategy could be to create a very nuanced framework that relates to one specific type of impact. For example, if on the AF you are going to be going very hard for the idea that genetically modified foods increase crop yields and save lives, a sort of framework that you could discuss is why governments or have an obligation, or in general why life is the most important thing that the society should be concerned with, and maximizing life is a round-winning argument. That's all you have to win to show. The downside to this, obviously, is that you're not allowing yourself necessarily a diverse impact base and are sort of focusing in on one specific harm. And with this topic, there are a lot of benefits and harms that have come up as a result of newfound research in the field. And I'd like to caveat by saying this is still a relatively new scientific field, and so a lot of the literature is not going to be taking as clear of a stance like, oh, this is really good or this is really bad, nor is it going to be necessarily conclusive, which is also really important to keep in mind, to not just accept authors' words as facts. In fact, I would even offer an observation at the top of the rebuttal if your opponents are simply saying, oh, like, author from X institution says GMOs are good. Like, ask them why. Make sure they have the claim warranted impact. And especially on this topic, you need to be explaining your arguments very thoroughly. So what are genetically modified foods? Let's go there next. So traditionally, the literature refers to them under the umbrella term of genetically modified organisms. So if you're having a little bit of trouble doing research specifically to foods, I would encourage you looking up GMOs. So the World Health Organization defines GMOs as organisms in which the genetic material has been altered in a way that does not occur naturally. It allows selected genes to be transferred from one organism into another, including non-related species. Such methods are used to create GMO plants, which result in GMO food crops. So that's just sort of a basic overview of what GMOs are. They're organisms that are quite literally modified, often in a laboratory-esque setting initially, and then applied on a macro level in farms to have certain attributes that wouldn't be naturally occurring. And Zach does a great job in our topic analysis discussing why you could be making specific scientific argumentation as to the benefits of GMOs. A further word on this topic, this is actually a fairly controversial topic and does receive a lot of media attention. So some of your judges might have preconceived notions, might have an idea about what they think that GMOs are. And unfortunately, that's something that you're going to have to work around in the round. And we believe the best way of doing this, the best way of convincing someone that their preconceived notions are wrong, is to thoroughly explain from its logical beginnings to its logical conclusions why your arguments are right. Don't assume the judge knows fact X, Y, or Z. Don't assume the judge knows who random author A, B, or C is. Simply explain it as if you were explaining it to a 6-year-old. That might sound like a joke, and I don't mean to insult any judge's intelligence, but often I know that, for me at least, it's always a lot easier to be evaluating rounds when I actually understand the arguments that are being made and am able to comprehend what the literature is actually saying. Be careful not to overstate claims also. That's important this month. So there are two basic pro strategies that I'm going to discuss in today's topic analysis, and that Zach does a wonderful job in the topic analysis, really hitting through the nittier-grittier details. And also, this is complemented very well by the November topic analysis, which has tons and tons of argumentation and insight onto what Zach and I discuss here. So the first thing that Zach says that you should be claiming right away from the outset is that GMOs have the incredible potential to eradicate world hunger. Remember, the resolution is not specific to the United States. So pro-debaters can argue that the long-term benefits that have yet to occur, if implemented on a large scale, if GMOs were implemented on a large scale, would warrant a pro-ballot, because simply the possibility of using GMOs to battle world hunger only exists in the pro-world where GMO use continues. And I think this is a very impactful argument when combined with the notion that populations are booming, that food output is not growing as fast as we expected, and that overall we have to be somehow accommodating these millions of new mouths that are going to be created to feed in the future. We think that's a very big impact you should be going for on the pro. In general, we think that at least one of your arguments, or two of your arguments, if you're running 3, should be those that are intuitive and stock. And the reason why this is advantageous is because, 1, stock arguments are stock for a reason. Often they're the most true on the literature, they have the most empirical evidence to back them. But also, and sort of from a very strategic standpoint, if you hit someone running 2 very stock arguments and 1 nuanced argument, in rebuttal, they're very likely to way overcover those first 2 arguments and leave your third, more nuanced, more clever argument untouched, which you can then blow up late in the round, right? After all, who doesn't love pulling out their block file and reading 15 responses to an argument that really only needed 1? This is a problem that many debaters have, and when you're giving the rebuttal, be careful not to get drenched down. Also, some other things that Zach discusses on the pro-strategic considerations are the scientific reasons, and Anna discusses this as well, the scientific reasons why GMOs can be beneficial. So often, for example, crops can only grow in certain months of the season, so they're temperature-resistant crops, there are there are insect-resistant crops, there are hybrids which are meant to be able to grow for a longer period of time, and there's also genetically modified crops that have been altered to deter other animals from eating and spoiling them. So by sort of referencing this current technology and giving examples of specific types of crops that do this, you create a persuasive case for why crop yields should go up, even if empirically they haven't necessarily. So once you actually start making those links, once you start proving that in general GMOs have these variety of advantages, what sort of impact should you be relating to? And we believe that there are 3 or 4 really big arguments that each pro team can choose to hit on. Obviously, there's the economic benefits of having these GMOs, right? So if you have a larger supply of food, then prices will go down because there's surplus and will be meeting demand. Additionally, so oftentimes GMOs can be cheaper to produce than traditional plants. And also, by increasing crop yields in general, countries have better economic performance because their agricultural sectors are producing very well. Interestingly, in places like the US, we still pay farmer subsidies on certain crops. We still had this former policy, if any of you have taken history, about limiting which crops can be sold and how much of each crop can be sold in order to maintain profitability. So we would sometimes pay farmers to literally destroy their surplus crops so we don't flood the food market. In the developing world, however, often there are no means to sort of control this production, and often the production falls short anyways. So GMOs can sort of solve for this deficit and step in and fulfill the need of the people. And so on the AF, generally, your arguments should be squared about how GMOs have scientific advantages that increase food yields. And from there, you have a variety of arguments. The second thing we would talk about here are the social benefits of modernity. And so basically the idea is, if societies are able to accept GMOs, they increase their capacity to move within the socioeconomic ladder for low-level farmers. They increase the ability of a small farmer to compete on a global market by diversifying and using modern techniques. And overall, socially, the society overall progresses by sort of adopting this modern thought. And a good author to check out here is Walter Rostow, who's the father of the theory of modernization and development. And so you can argue how GMOs are one of those necessary steps and necessary sectors that need to modernize in order for developing economies to both grow economically and socially and culturally and politically. Beyond that, the AF also has the obvious lives impact and food shortages impact, right? So by linking into these arguments, you're very clearly saving lives, which is a huge impact in any round, and any sort of analysis that goes specifically on why lives are the most important, carry the most weight, are going to be the ones that win the round. So that being said, let's now turn to the negative side of this topic. And we think that additionally on the negative, there's also a variety of impacts that you could be running. So first and foremost, my strong suggestion is that in order to preempt common affirmative offense, you might want to run an argument about why GMOs actually don't increase food output levels. And empirically, there is support for this, right? The advantage being that you can get out ahead of the game and you can stop the most prominent affirmative argument early in the round. The disadvantage being that you can't. You're basically running your turns in case, so there's less to be said in the rebuttal. And that's a strategy decision that ultimately you have to make. But a good source to check out for where crop yields have actually decreased is the Institute for Responsible Technologies. They found that GMOs do not increase yields and work against feeding a hungry world, whereas sustainable non-GMO agricultural methods used in developing countries have conclusively resulted in yield increases of 79% and higher. GMOs do not, on average, increase yields at all. And that's a quote from their study. And so they cite a bunch of different empirical analysis. One study, which was authored by more than 400 scientists and backed by 60 governments, found that GM crop yields were highly variable, and yields, in fact, sometimes declined. So this is like really good empirical analysis that will preempt a lot of what the affirmative is trying to push across. Another thing you could do on the negative is to sort of have a well-rounded case in terms of impacts. And the advantage to this is that for those of you who don't feel comfortable running a very tailored, very specific framework as to why one impact is the most important, you hedge your bets by running a diversified case. So by diversifying a case's impact base, you also create room for more late-round flexibility. Let's say your opponents have an incredible rebuttal to your first argument about why crop yields don't actually decrease. You still have a fighting chance when you link back to things beyond simply, oh, like life is the most important, you lose lives because of less crop yield. So we think that this pick and choose strategy can be really, really beneficial for debaters, especially later on in the month when teams are generally going to have a pretty diverse block file. Running one argument is really, really risky. But having said that, the clear advantage to running one very strong argument is that you're creating a narrative from the onset, right? So if you put it in the judge's mind that the only thing that matters in today's debate, the end-all be-all for what an impact is for solving, say, food shortages or feeding the starving or saving lives, whatever it might be. You are creating the emotional rhetoric and the connection that often is going to be the difference in late out rounds between a good team winning and a great team winning that 2-1 decision, that 3-0 decision, and in finals of a lot of these tournaments, that 5, even sometimes 7-0 decision. So by really understanding your framework, by really explaining it, you give yourself the time to say, okay, here, look, this is our initial claim, that lives are the most important thing in society. Here are reasons why. Then here's what GMOs do in order to save or hurt these lives, and here's the impact overall on lives, and here's why all of this matters once again. And by that, you really make it abundantly clear. You hammer home what is important to the judge to understand in the debate. And so overall, we think that this month, the teams, again, that are going to be more successful are going to be the ones that research really heavily, that are able to understand and explain the methodologies and explain the flawed methodologies of certain authors, and that have a general understanding in the scientific field. So do a little bit of background reading, dive in really early because tournaments are coming up really quickly, so it's advantageous to get out ahead of the curve. And we really hope that this topic analysis helped. For further analysis, Zach and I have authored a co-topic analysis in this month's November Champions Briefs. Justin and Anna do a wonderful job breaking down the topic, and overall there's a lot of argumentation that's both unique and strongly warranted in Champions Briefs November topic brief for public forum. Thanks, guys. Have a good one.